it's very exciting to be working on the multiple levels that happen with a conductor. You have to be a scholar, you have to be committed to studying this music in great depth, and to the point where it becomes a part of you. My colleague is Maestro Gerard Schwartz, world famous conductor, and he's such an inspiration in that. His knowledge of music is among the largest I've ever seen in any one individual.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Sorry I'm a little late. I just was running from a class, believe it or not.
Oh, well, you are so well dressed for the Zoom interview. Hi.
Well, I always dress this way at school. I believe in presenting a certain way.
Yeah. Yes, of course. And I love that you wear a tie for my Zoom interview. I think it's a first.
Sometimes I don't wear a tie and my students say, what happened? What's going on?
Oh, really? Scott, this is so lovely to meet you, even if it's on Zoom.
Likewise.
But you are, what an incredible resume or things that you do. It's just everything.
Well, it's a wonderful mix, and I feel so lucky that today that is not considered abnormal. It's really we've broken down a lot of the individual pathways into many different connecting routes. For example, today, Friday, it's our end of the week at the university, and there are all sorts of different classes. On this day, I started at 9 o'clock on a class on the classical period, historical performance, with all different instruments, including voice. And then I just did a group lesson, my first ever group lesson with my studio. So 15 of my students, and we were playing, guess what? Altvin.
Really? Oh, wow.
Oh, and working on Viennese slides and Gemütlichkeit, and all that stuff.
Really? Oh,
and
wow.
Then
so
as we go on.
The timing was good. The timing was good, either for the interview or for your lesson.
Oh, and then after that is string form, all the string players together play for the faculty. And after that, I teach conducting form.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it sort of encapsulates a little bit the kind of variety of things I do, which is endlessly fruitful for me.
Do you find that it's the different things that you do that they in a way when they link together that you learn from each discipline, basically, that you can almost cross over in style, not styles, but how do I say it that it doesn't sound that blonde, that you take from one thing and can add to another.
It's so very true. One of my most memorable musical moments was as concertmaster of an orchestra where the great singer Lena Horne sang. And she was standing about, 2 feet in front of me. And her big hit, Don't Know Why, There's No Sun Up in the Sky, Stormy Weather.
Oh, yeah.
She turned towards me and she looked right in my eyes and she sang that song to me. And it was the most thrilling experience to be on stage with this legend and her singing it to me about 3 feet away. And I think of that so often. I think of her electricity. I think of her persona. And I find that inspires me in all different genres of music. The same thing with Pavarotti. I would play with Pavarotti, play a solo with him, and you feed off of that electricity. And then go in the recording studio and record with Michael Jackson or Shakira or the Bee Gees and have that connection again of greatness and musical inspiration. And I think it definitely can cut across all genres. That's why I'm so excited about the path of music today. I think we're in the best time in the history of music, as far as I'm concerned.
Really? That's very
because of that cross-pollination that happens. Yeah. It's really, I think at no other time really is there that richness of invention and really being inspired by other cultures and other ways of looking at art.
I mean, I don't have any music education and music background, and I don't know the music world, but by speaking to a lot of musicians and a lot of artists, I see this also, that there's this and I think after the pandemic, everybody says to me that people start really collaborating and really working together. And I have this idea that young musicians now are much more trying new things and also collaborating with each other. And I have this idea that this will bring some new movement into the to the music industry as well, because they've come from this rock bottom place where they just now start experimenting and doing things and creating very exciting projects.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was in school, it was very much you had a certain path. In terms of being a violinist, it was be an orchestral player, or be a chamber musician, or be a soloist, or be a teacher. And the paths never crossed, except for in my case, I would play studio orchestra. I would play jazz with people like the Brecker brothers and wonderful musicians, and was sort of laughed at for doing that, but came to appreciate the greatness of great music in any genre. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this pandemic, as awful as it is and has been and continues to be, I think it's going to reap amazing benefits, especially for our young people. I mean, the level of energy here at the Frost School, with all of us finally being on campus together, is palpable. Just, it's so exciting. I have to tell you, and this, I guess I'm bragging. I shouldn't brag so much, but I've been teaching for 25 years. And when I started out, I was a pretty young teacher, and I practiced my lecture so diligently. It was brilliant. I put in jokes. I was going to be incredibly colorful, speak well. So I did my first class, and people were back there, you know, snoozing, yawning. I was expecting them to applaud at the end of my lecture. And they didn't. They just walked out. Next class, okay. And I'll tell you, last semester, I taught a class it's called Peak Performance, to build up performance skills for graduate students. And for whatever reason, the last class, everyone applauded. And I told them, I said, I've been waiting 25 years for this. Yeah. But you know what? In hindsight, it wasn't about me. It was about a class of, 15 students of all different instruments actually being able to be in the same space and performing for each other in the midst of a time where we were worried that that would never happen again, that we'd be condemned to just online. So I think we're going to have a tremendous burst of creativity because of this. And it's very exciting. As an educator, it's very exciting.
Yeah, I can imagine you see it firsthand, and because you know also how it was before and how it's now going to be. And I think it's I don't know how it is in America, and I don't know if it's just overall classical music. Is there a sort of an idea, if you're classically trained and you go through all the training and the schooling and everything, that if you then start doing the crossover things, or playing now for a band, something, that it's not the right thing to do, or that it's a bit frowned upon. Is there such a thing, such a prejudice?
There used to be for sure, and you were sort of downgraded.
Yeah.
Now we find some of the best players, some of the best classical players are discovering new ways of making music, and that's whether they're playing heavy metal or they're playing electronic dance music or Latin music. So that's really changed in this country because, from the classical music establishment, it was a downgrade to go play with a band or something. And I think we've matured. We've grown up past that. And the famous Duke Ellington statement, there's only two kinds of music, the good kind and the other kind.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's very, very true, that we can find excellence. The dean of our School of Music here, the Frost School of Music, is Shelley Berg, who's a pianist and primarily a jazz pianist, but also an excellent classical pianist. He did a recording with the London Symphony a few years ago of Rhapsody in Blue. And it really, as a classical performance, it's fantastic. And then in the middle of the piece, he has his jazz trio there, bass and drums, and they break off and they improvise in the middle. And it's some of the most wonderful, inventive jazz in the midst of Rhapsody in Blue. So the classical elements are of the highest level and the jazz is of the highest level. I think we really can do that for the first time, I think, I'm saying, in history, in music history.
Mm.
And it's something I do as a conductor with the Mancini Orchestra. I'm working with both classically trained orchestral musicians and jazz players. And they each have their challenges, and we try to get each one to do the uncomfortable thing for them. So, of course, getting the classical players, getting an oboist to learn to swing in the right style or to feel where the strong beats are or the sense of tempo is a challenge, as well as for a lead trumpet player in jazz who can scream on those high notes in improv to actually play pictures at an exhibition with a round, beautiful, subtle kind of sound is a challenge. And it's an exciting one to me because we, as musicians, we should be able to make all kinds of sounds and use them just as you do, with your eye and your sense of balance and proportion and light and shade. You probably have a heightened sense of that from anyone else. And we need to heighten that color range in terms of our lives as musicians.
Well, I'm a bit of a cowboy when it comes to shooting with my camera. So I just do what I want.
Excellent. How wonderful. Well, I do have to say, I think I'm sharing. I need to pay you like a psychotherapist fee because I'm feeling as someone who's now, because of the pandemic, I lost so much work.
Really?
It was terrible. It's coming back now, but thank goodness for being here at the Frost School because teaching, I've always loved teaching, but it provided some kind of stable base. But you reach a certain point where you want to say to the students, don't listen to me anymore. Go out there and do it. Just do it. Experiment, fail, but try. And I worry sometimes about giving too much beautifully polished and crafted pearls of wisdom to students instead of saying, you've got to go out and fail and make your own mistakes and learn from them and grow. This is something that fascinates me as a performer, trying to center myself not on playing well or playing correctly, but on communicating, on giving something out. And I'm sure you do that with your work. You're finding images and art that establishes some kind of connection with the viewer in a way, right? I find that, I do a lot of contemporary music, new music written, new classical contemporary music, some of which is a little bit edgy, has some dissonance to it, has different kinds of sounds. And I'll go play for a concert series in North Dakota or in Kansas. And the relatively conservative audiences there love this music. And I think part of it is that they're open to different kinds of sounds. But then another part of it is that we're coming to it as performers with an open heart and with a real desire to connect. And I think that is a really important part of the equation.
It's interesting that you say that because I've been asking many artists about the same thing, is this connection. Connecting to the audience that, so for me, for instance, who I'm not a musician, I'm not a big concert goer, not that I don't like music, but I'm not one of these diehard, I've got my seats there and I'm going every single concert. And sometimes it's also because of now that people start talking about their music or communicating to me what they're doing, I get so inquisitive. I'm dying to hear this thing or going to this concert, and it's because it's communicated to me in a different way, or there's a story behind it. And I think this is something that you're touching now, this communication. I think it's very important, especially as artists, that you educate the audiences in a way, not in a lecture way, but in a way of giving new things and letting audiences experience new things.
Right. Well, one of my favorite violinists of all time was the great American violinist Isaac Stern.
Mm.
And he had a unique gift. In his latter years, he wasn't infallible. He had a unique kind of sound. But every time I heard him, and I could hear him, with listening with 10 people or with 3,000 people, you felt compelled to listen to him. You felt that he was playing directly to you. Remarkable. And he would even walk up to the edge of the stage, to the very lip of the stage, and play in a 3,000 seat auditorium. And you connected with that sound so directly. And that, boy, it was hard not to be totally sold on everything he did. Remarkable artist. Even someone like, I'm only talking about violinists now, but someone like Jascha Heifetz, who was renowned for his perfection, his fast tempi, and when he played, he was very strong, didn't smile. And yet he would talk to students about, if you're playing a phrase and you notice the audience is sort of shifting in their seats, so they look like there's no energy, do something in the music. Take a little time, play a note louder, wait a little bit, establish that connection. So this man whose persona was very much not appearing to be about the audience at all was very conscious of the audience.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think it's important. It's great that you tell that to the students as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's an idol to me because he represented a pinnacle of perfection, but he didn't stop there. He was always taking risks. And he talked about that in his teaching. Take a chance. He said, no one's going to die. Take a risk. Go for it. It only hurts once, is what he would say. I find that also working with conductors, which I am enjoying so much. We have 4 graduate conductors here at the Frost School of Music, one of whom, Camilo, just won the assistantship with Gustavo Dudamel in the LA Philharmonic. Oh. So he's doing his assistantship in LA and coming back to school here. So back and forth, still a student, but working with one of the top conductors and top orchestras in the world. And we're very proud of him. It's very exciting to be working on the multiple levels that happen with a conductor. You have to be a scholar. You have to be committed to studying this music in great depth and to the point where it becomes a part of you. My colleague is Maestro Gerard Schwartz, world famous conductor, and he's such an inspiration in that. His knowledge of music is among the largest I've ever seen in any one individual. And he's curious and he'll study. I mentioned one piece to him last year that he hadn't heard of, and the next time I saw him the next day, he said, "That's a wonderful piece." He looked it up and listened to it. So we have that element of study, deep, almost religious monk-like study. And then how do you communicate it with the ensemble in our gestures, in our persona? And that's a very subtle thing too, because, young conductors, they feel we have to be strong and stern and lead. And as well as I, that great leadership is also embracing the followers and becoming one of the followers too. It's not just forging ahead, it's gathering everyone together. And that takes a while to learn. Then the other element of connecting with the audience and having an interpretation that connects. So again, I'm so blessed to be working with conductors and working with violinists and working with vocalists and wind players and conducting and playing the violin and writing music and writing plays and articles and things. They all, as you said at the beginning, they all influence each other in totally positive ways.
Well, I have a thing for conductors, and not in a way you think. Exactly what you're talking about. I find so fascinating that you have not an instrument but that you bring all these instruments to one sound, and there's so much. There's so much more going on than just knowing the music, and it's like you say, all this connection and all this
and it's remarkable because
I think
in one gesture you can totally change the sound of an orchestra. It's amazing what you do with the preparation will totally change the sound of the ensemble. And 2 conductors, one phrase apart will be absolutely different. It's truly remarkable. It's almost magical, but there is a process to it.
That's yeah. I find it magical that you do that. I have many conductors in my project that I photographed in the windows. Yeah, and and I've spoken to many here in Vienna, and that specific thing. This is really that fascinates me. So I love to talk to conductors about the music and how they do it, and like you say now, there has to be this also the chemistry, not with the orchestra, but also the audience, I think, feel it, And then this fascinating thing with ballet, I all these things I learned from you. It's like this ballet conducting and the opera conducting, all these different things that you never know. I never knew that everything has a different a way of doing it as well. So
it's all different, and yet it's all united in so many ways also. The way an oboe player will play a phrase versus the way a double bass player will play. There's so many ways one can influence the other in terms of our perspective. And certainly the dance, oh my goodness. And don't get me started on opera, because that's it's been my life for so many years with the Florida Grand Opera here. And we're all trying to sing in our own way. So
so and when you're teaching now the conducting, so do they have to do all these say this for the ballet and for the opera, or do they specialize in one specific thing?
Well, through Micro Schwartz, we're concentrating on the standard orchestral repertoire. So right now we're doing Brahms' Third Symphony. We have Shostakovich 5. We have Till Eulenspiegel of Strauss. So it's works that show a great depth in conductors, and it's the kind of repertoire that really shows to their strengths. And so that's really where we're living right now. Ballet and opera we get to in a limited way, but this helps get you auditions. This helps get you in competitions and gets you positions. And it is interesting too that teaching conducting, besides all the other things I mentioned, you have to speak well. You have to be able to program well. You have to know the repertoire well enough to, hey, I need a 3-minute piece that involves 3 trombones and a triangle. You have to know a list of pieces like that can fit the bill. And also deal with boards and artistic administrators and be a fundraiser. That Valery Gergiev, one of the greatest conductors today, besides being a phenomenal musician, is so wonderful at connecting with people who can help the orchestras grow financially. And that's a very important message. It's something I love to do because I love to meet people, and it's not about money. It's about sharing the magic of this, the inspiration of this music with people who can do something to help. And I think it's very, very important.
And for you, and then when did you make the switch to conducting? Or do you're still as a violinist? You still
a violinist? Yes. Yeah. I still mainly consider myself a violinist, but I started conducting in high school and worked with some very fine teachers and played a lot of chamber music and small groups with violin. There's so much leadership involved. And I've always been attracted to that. When I play in orchestras, I play as concertmaster, which leads the string section and is one of the leaders of the orchestra, sort of the liaison between the conductor and the orchestra, a diplomat sometimes. But I've always been fascinated with that role. So it's not that much of a jump to actually stand up on the podium and conduct. Very similar kinds of principles are involved. But yeah, it happened gradually over the years. I went to school, had an orchestral job after that, and then have had a string quartet for 20 years and other chamber groups, a piano trio now, and a contemporary music trio. So I'm still doing those areas, but then teaching conducting here and having the Mancini Orchestra here as well. Conducting has really taken over as a significant part of my life, even though I'm still a violinist at heart. See, my violin never leaves my side. Here it is right here.
Oh, wow. Oh, there's the violin. Hold it up a little bit higher. Let me see. Oh,
This is an interesting
beautiful.
instrument because it's a
Yeah,
copy of
yeah,
one of the great Stradivari from 1715,
yeah.
but it was made by one of the top American makers. And I communicated with him through Facebook Messenger. So the birth of this
Yeah.
violin happened through the internet, including to the point I told him what kind of sound I wanted. And
Yeah.
I was inspired by, do you know the great violinist Anna Sophie Mutter?
Yeah.
And her sound is so wonderful. So I asked for a violin that sounded like that. So he worked on this. And he
Amazing.
even sent me pictures of the wood of the back and had me choose the wood. So I chose these particular
Yeah.
pieces of maple. I chose the varnish color. So I did all of that through the internet. And
Really.
in a year and a half, he sent me this violin, and it's astounding that everything I wanted in a violin, he was able to deliver. It's really
That's
miraculous, and it's not
incredible. Yeah.
$15 million, so that's great.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's the violin to me is a miracle because of the sound it produces, and to hold one in your hands and caress it when you play it, it makes such an amazing sound.
But that's so, I didn't know that you can, that you can change the sound of the violin, that you can
It's
make
incredible.
it in such a way.
Part of it is the architecture of it, how
Yeah.
curved the top is.
Oh,
They call
okay.
this the belly, and there's a certain, I don't know if you can see, there's a certain curve to the wood
Yeah.
that's carved, and how thick the wood is obviously changes the sound. There's so many elements, and working with luthiers, with instrument makers, is very exciting to me because they have such a passion. They're craftsmen. They work hard. They love hearing their instruments played. And I've had this instrument now, I think, 6 years. And it's
Oh,
just,
okay.
I've played with Stradivari's and Guarneri's. I have older, expensive
Yeah.
Italian instruments too. This absolutely compares with them. So,
Really. Mm.
yeah.
I would love to speak to your violin maker. That would be so
Yes.
interesting.
Oh, he's wonderful.
Yes.
In Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island. Andrew
Really?
Ryan, his name.
Andrew
Yeah.
Ryan. I'm
Yeah.
going to see if he will speak to me because that would be so interesting. Yeah.
It really is. You can
Yeah.
look him up
Yeah.
on YouTube too. There's a
Mm.
couple of videos of his work.
Yeah.
Mm.
So but I saw you do arrangements as well and
Yes. Yeah.
composing.
Composing as well, and writing, actual writing. I've written 4 plays,
Is there
and
anything that you don't do?
I don't know how great a writer I am, but I enjoy it. What I've been doing for the past recent months is writing articles for a magazine called Strings Magazine
Yeah.
about the string world. And so I write in pretty much every issue. And it's interesting because it's like anything. You practice something and you get better at it. I write articles, and now I can write a 750-word article in a
Really?
day, and I know exactly how long it's going to be. It takes very little editing, and it's from just doing it. If I have to write a 1,500-word article, that takes a little more thought because I'm not used to that format.
Mm.
But yeah, again, this, as one progresses in life, one has so much one wants to share. I was very blessed to have teachers who were amazing and had a passion with sharing their experiences. Most of my teachers were in their 80s and 90s. In fact, one of them, I think, probably has the world record as oldest teacher. He was teaching at 101. And when he passed away, he was teaching in his hospital bed. Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. There's that desire. I have it as a teacher. I want to keep teaching until I can't anymore.
Really?
You feed off of the energy of the students. And I'll tell you, in my studio, I have 15 students, and they all work so incredibly hard, and they're very, very serious about their work. And so, boy, the sky's the limit of how far you can go when you have young people to work with that are that committed.
Well, I think it's also like a great talent to be able to teach your art, because I think not all artists are able to teach.
Right.
So it's, yeah, and also hear from many that they're not really interested in teaching, but then there are many who really say that they love to teach and that they feel like they want to do it.
Yeah. It's a challenge. Sometimes it's like a puzzle because you can have the most brilliant things to communicate,
Mm.
And you can communicate them in the most clear, beautiful way, and it won't reach a certain student.
Mm.
So I like to think I have a toolbox of solutions. So if I'm telling them about how to work on the vibrato and it doesn't click, I'll try another tactic. And then I'll totally switch into another way of thinking until I find the solution that connects with that student. And that moment that that happens, I sometimes jump up and down. It's
Oh, really?
so
Really?
exciting.
Yeah.
The
Well,
aha moments.
yeah. Well, I spoke to a ballet teacher once, and he said this thing where sometimes it's the same thing being said by a different teacher, or the same type of thing, but it's just said in a different way. Then it clicks in with a ballet dancer. And it's probably you have a way to do different approaches, so you've already have this experience of knowing how to say it in a different way.
Exactly. Early on in my teaching, I had a student from Taiwan who got to this country, and I didn't realize that his English was terrible.
Mm.
So we'd have the first couple lessons, and every time I said something, he'd smile and nod. And I thought, okay, he's understanding what I'm saying. The third lesson, I said, do you understand what I just told you? Yes, yes. What did I just tell you? Yes, yes. So I realized I couldn't use words.
Oh, yeah.
And it was an amazing moment because I had to take that whole element of verbal communication and put it aside. And so I would play, I would demonstrate, I would use gestures. And boy, did that ever help me as a teacher. It was such a wonderful experience. And again, we found a way to communicate and for him to grow. It was so very exciting.
Well, I find it also interesting in many of the interviews that I did over a lockdown, and also the musicians that I photographed in their windows. Teachers played such a great role during the pandemic, because I really heard so many times of musicians saying, "Oh, I have a lesson in a half an hour, and I'm so looking forward to my lesson." And I don't think it's necessarily had to do with the lesson, but it had to do with that contact with the teacher and the encouragement. And this is also what I heard a lot, is the encouragement that they received from their teachers. And I think how wonderful it is in this industry that the teachers play such an important role in an artist's career, or in their path.
There's been a big change. I mean, when I was a student, what we called the old school teachers, which were a lot of teachers from Eastern Europe and from Europe, were tough.
Mm.
They would never compliment you, never, ever. If something went well, they'd say, next. And quite often, a colleague, that never happened to me, I don't know why, but colleagues of mine, students, were told, you're not good enough. Why don't you do something else? You're never going to make a career as a violinist. You're never going to be a cellist. And they would persevere. You can't teach that way anymore today, and people don't. But the idea back then was that life is tough, and I'm going to make life tougher for you as a teacher. And if you really want to do this, you're going to persevere. And when you do, you're going to come out of it a stronger player. I get it. It makes sense. I don't teach that way, and most people don't teach that way. We are in the encouragement mold, which I think is very, very important. There was a great cellist, Zara Nelsova, one of the great cellists of the middle part of the 20th century. And she was asked about that. When you have a student that is not going to be successful and have a career, how do you tell them, to consider something else? And she said very quickly, that's not my job. My job is not to dissuade someone from their dreams. My job is to help them get there, however I can do it. And I've really taken that to heart over the years. And I think it works. I really think it works. There have been a couple of students that I've been realistic with about, that it's going to be a tough ride, but I feel very strongly that if one commits oneself and focuses, we can achieve the kind of career opportunities that are possible these days. And so I am all about lifting the student up. I think it's very, very important.
Well, I think so too. I think, it's, I sometimes think it's not anybody else who can decide Yeah, I know in the industry there are, certain things, and okay, maybe this person will not make it in the orchestra or whatever, but you never know what they do. You never know how creative they are in a different way. And maybe it's these students or these people that do it in a different way that we need, you know?
Well, and seeing on your podcast, you're talking with musicians who have many different paths, and
Yeah.
it's so wonderful. I really appreciate it because it's so wonderful, I think, for audiences to hear a little bit of the inside track of being a musician. We see us dressed up on stage and performing, but there's always other motivators there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like to run. I love to run. I'm not very fast anymore. I'm a little overweight from COVID, but I adore going out in the morning. I run in like 5:30 in the morning. I get up early, and the feeling of going somewhere on my own power at my own speed is endlessly energizing for me. And as a composer, I've written pieces in my head as I run.
Really?
And people are sort of astonished by that, but it's amazing how it creates focus in your brain when you do something like that. So some certainly arrangements, I've done whole arrangements in my head when running. It's a wonderful, it's a break, and yet it also is an inspiration for creativity.
Yeah. So okay. So apart from running, what else do you do on your downtime when you have downtime? Because
I haven't had a lot of
busy
downtime
man.
lately, unfortunately, but I live in Florida and it's beautiful here. I love to go to the beach. I don't go as often as I would like.
Mhm.
What else do I do? Oh my goodness. Well,
What part of
I
Florida?
like to make art. I like to paint.
Oh, really?
I love to paint.
Oh.
Again, I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy the process. And sometimes just losing myself in the process is very exciting to me. Yeah.
Well, this is also in what I find interesting in lockdown, how artists have started doing other art forms when they were stuck at home, and I'm sure you can only practice so much, but then they start painting or even cooking and baking and things like that. I find as an art, and that you have this very natural way of creating, of trying to create all the time.
It's an addiction in a way. It's a wonderful addiction. I do love to cook too. Oh my goodness, I love to cook.
Oh, really? What do you cook?
I improvise. I love to improvise.
Okay.
Discovering how ingredients work and how you can use them as tools. Again, I'm talking about tools all the time, but I don't really like to follow recipes very much. But having an understanding of what a certain spice does, or what a roux does, and utilizing those to create my own creations.
And there's another thing that I want to ask you. How do you have a little ritual before a performance? How do you prepare on the day before the performance?
Well, I like to get to the venue early.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a concert tomorrow with the most recent winner of the Chopin piano competition, and we were slated to rehearse just a half hour before the concert.
Really?
And I'm thinking, no, let's rehearse at 5, so we have some time in the space. But to get adjusted to the space, to be at peace there, to get my mind in it, and I find, especially coming out of the pandemic, what I do before a concert is so much more important, because I've had so many fewer concerts this past year than ever in my life. I've been performing for 40 years, and to have a year and a half of a handful of performances, and most of those were online streamed performances from my living room. The live concert experience becomes something even more charged with energy and importance. So for me, it's getting there early. It's feeling connected with the venue. I don't eat too much. I like to eat much afterwards. Yes, with a nice glass of wine.
I want to ask, are you a wine man or a beer man?
I am a wine man.
You're
Absolutely.
a wine man, okay. Because I hear what they do, what everybody does after the performance. I
love beer. I just don't love the carbs. That's the problem.
Oh, okay. So you're a wine man. Good.
I'm really into champagnes these days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really fun. but yeah, I mean, the class I teach called Peak Performance is really about that, and about some of the strategies performers could do who suffer from anxiety. I mean, I do too. I get a little bit nervous.
Mm.
And there are all sorts of strategies that are so wonderful to share with people that involve visualization. You put yourself in your happy place and you work on breathing exercises, and it really works. These things really work. And I find them so important because, again, I'm repeating myself, I want to connect with the audience. I want to play well, but I want that connection. And I don't want to be obsessed with trying to do things perfectly. I want to try to be focused on sharing what I've learned. And that takes an element of trusting. I like to say playing the violin or conducting is in a way an act of faith. You can't plan everything out, and you shouldn't plan everything out. Maestro Schwartz, my colleague, if a conducting student is conducting in a rather academic way, he'll say, well, try something. Just do something. What should I do, Maestro? Doesn't matter. Just do something. Create something. And more often than not, in fact, every single time, what comes across is intensely musical and intensely communicative. So as a performer, I look to do that. I look to try to do that. Again, Anna-Sophie Mutter is a great example of that. She's someone who plays with such abandon and freedom and connection with the moment, living in the moment rather than planning for the moment. Sometimes I disagree with what she does, but that's not the point. The point is she is creating actively and with great freedom and creativity. And that to me is so important. And trying to instill that in my students is a big thing too.
But I think freedom, that freedom that you're talking about, it's not as easy. I mean, it's much easier to follow guidelines and rules and knowing exactly what to do. But the moment you sort of have to think for yourself or have to think of something, I think that is always a bit difficult.
It's very tricky. As a conductor, the kinds of concerts I do, for the most part, I'm the MC too, so I'm talking to the audience. I'm sometimes conducting to video. I'm certainly working with great artists, accompanying them. And all of those are very different skills. So to go out on stage and extemporize on a certain topic for 3 minutes, because I don't like to write down notes or cue cards or anything, say my piece and then turn around and switch gears to actually becoming connected with the music as a conductor, that's a bit of a challenge. I consider it a fun challenge, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I wouldn't, but I can understand, that you suddenly have to change that. So, and then you
film too, and that's a similar kind of thing. You are really imprisoned by time. I mean, if you're conducting a certain scene, like from Indiana Jones or something like that, you have your own little screen, like a laptop on the podium that has these bars that flash across in rhythmic succession to give you the bar lines. And you conduct to that. Of course, if you only conduct mechanically to that, the orchestra is going to get off.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with that concrete information of this absolutely rigid time that is given only to you and communicate that to the orchestra. And quite often you're going to have to make up time or take more time to make it work out. And that is quite a challenge, to make the music seem alive rather than stale.
Oh, yeah.
And canned. You want it to breathe a little bit. Again, it's a different kind of conducting, but it's a fun challenge.
But now, I'm a girl, so I'm going to ask you now, what do you wear?
It's an interesting time because
do you wear a frock or a?
I usually, when I'm conducting classically, I'll wear a frock.
Yeah.
But even tuxedos, I have probably 15 tuxedos. I love clothes. I have 15 tuxedos.
Really?
And I have not worn them in a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. As a conductor, the orchestra can be in frock, the orchestra can be in tuxedos and smoking, and I can wear a black shirt, black tie, and a black suit, and that's fine.
Really?
Yeah. I try to wear things that are well tailored and feel comfortable and look good. Yeah. But I mean, the idea of walking out in a tuxedo for me is rather old-fashioned. I want to, and I think as a conductor, we don't have to do that. The whole idea with all of this dress is to be uniform in a certain sense, so that the music comes out. So the music is center stage. And I know this is an issue. There are more and more female conductors these days, wonderful conductors, and I'm always very interested, especially when I work with female conductors, what they're going to wear when they conduct. And who am I to say what someone should wear, of the opposite sex especially. But it runs the gamut from women wearing tailored suits to wearing gowns and heels. And I don't necessarily have a preference as far as that goes. I think I like the idea that a concert should be a celebration, and that you show the importance of it with a certain level of dress that's special.
Yeah.
By the same token, I really don't want music to become so snobbish.
Yeah.
I would love for the audience to see, to really live in the passion that we musicians show. And sometimes that doesn't happen because of those boundaries that happen. It's a hard balance, especially in this country, I think, in the United States, because a certain element of the audience really wants that formality. They want the formal concert hall. And look, those concert halls sound wonderful. The acoustic is great. The orchestra looks great when we're all matching in frock. But something doesn't necessarily connect with a younger audience or with a more varied audience that would. One thing I like to try to do whenever possible is get audiences up on stage.
Really?
Either with an open rehearsal or have stage seating whenever possible. It's not so possible with social distancing now because of COVID. But it's amazing to talk to audience members who have never done it, to hear them talk about being on the stage in front of an orchestra. It's life-changing for them. That energy, it's the greatest instrument in the world, the full symphony orchestra. And to hear that energy, to see the commitment of the players, there is nothing boring at all about this. It is about the most exciting music ever. And I wish there were a way to, get entire audiences up on stage to experience this up close. I suppose it's different venues. But I mean, the traditional concert hall, you have the best in Vienna, has the most wonderful sound. And it's acoustic principles that make sense. The golden principle, the golden mean, makes absolute sense. So I get it from an acoustic standpoint, but from trying to welcome new audiences, it doesn't always work.
Well,
But dress. I like looking good, looking special, and trying to be warm and approachable.
Well, I've also talked about this fact that now that you're mentioning actually many things that I touched upon on other interviews, and this is the dress thing. Also, here during the pandemic, I saw many more students here from our university or from the local universities play in the streets and parks, and I loved it because I could see the also the energy amongst them while they were playing. And it's like dressed down, it's like jeans and t-shirts and trainers, and they play in the street and the park, and you can see it's so relaxed. I cannot, because I'm not trained, I cannot say that it's perfect, but it's probably just just smashing it. But the young children who stand there, who comes and just stand and watch, and this is where I thought, this is the greatest way, I think, to get audiences who would not necessarily go to the concert hall, to be introduced to music and to see that classical music is, it can be fun. And 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 of course I know the concert hall has to be the concert hall, but to get young people to go to the concert hall is a great idea.
Well, it's true. It's why you see all these flash mob concerts now outside. They are connecting with so many people. I mean, I don't know if you have it in Europe, but in America, all my life in the press, in newspaper reviews, in radio interviews, people have been saying, well, you know, the classical music audience is getting older and older. I've been hearing that for 50 years.
Oh,
50
yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So by now, the average classical audience music goer should be about 170, you know?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think they're getting older. I think there's a certain maturity level that draws one to classical music. And that's a fact. I don't think it's getting older necessarily. What I want, however, is greater action to welcome younger people. And to me, the only solution is education at the youngest ages.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I worry because it just doesn't happen enough, especially in this country and at the most rudimentary level. And the problem is you can't fund it. People don't want to pay for that. They want to pay for new schools. They want to pay for technology. They want to pay for testing. Of course, all those things that to them guarantee success and not what is actually going to cultivate a well-rounded young person. So there's very little money thrown in the way of elementary school music education or arts, even art. I mean, it's insane. Or recess, playtime in school. It doesn't happen in many schools anymore, to the detriment of kids.
This is, I don't know if you've read the books of Seth Godin, the American, Seth Godin. He talks about this exactly, that the school system is based on the industrial revolution, you know, that the maths and the sciences are these very important subjects. And actually, if you think of it, there's such great link between math, science, and art that really art should be alongside these two subjects in schools. And I think it's, like I said, it's also in Europe happening, where funding, there's when there's any cut, it's cuts to the arts, you know, to so that's
it's very
valuable.
short-sighted. I was on a committee with Universal Music Group, which used to be the largest classical music label. They owned Sony and Deutsche Grammophon, and we were the committee was tasked with finding younger audiences. How do we attract younger audiences? And subjects were brought up. Oh, bring technology into the concert hall, screens, have food and drink, make the creature comforts of the concert hall like a five-star hotel. All of this wonderful ideas, but really on the surface.
Yeah.
And I'm the one person that suggested education, and
really?
in one ear and out the other. Nobody listened. Nobody listened.
Listen, this is, I'm so passionate about this. I strongly believe that there should be, for every child in the world, a possibility to have some exposure to art in the school. Because, you know, you hear so many stories. I mean, I spoke yesterday to a violinist who told me about the, in Venezuela, is it the El Sistema?
El Sistema, right.
Yeah, that concept, or the idea that they give instruments to children. If I speak to singers in South Africa, they talk about how they sang in a choir, and then from there they establish, you know, all these skills that you learn by doing an art form, you know, and they talk about that so positively, and saying that in you know, that took them out of a life where they didn't have anything, or where they, you know, it's some give them direction, and it gives them it's motivation to do things. And it's so basic. It's, you know, choir singing. You don't need even.
Unfortunately, I feel that in this country, there's a level of panic. We want our kids to succeed. We want them to find good jobs and be earners. And that's very, very important. And we're panicked about it. And we're concerned that they're not getting, that the education standards in this country are not as high as elsewhere in the world. We're very concerned about that. So what do? We build new buildings, and we test the teachers and we test the students as much as possible, with the idea that that's going to create the desired result, when I don't think it does. I really don't. If you're sacrificing those kinds of incredibly important programs in
Yeah.
favor of testing students.
Mm.
It's suicide. And I know I have many friends who are teachers in public schools, and this obsession with testing from school boards and from our governments, local, state, federal, is really a problem, because what happens is the teachers all teach to the test. They teach the test, basically.
Yeah.
And so you have some wonderful, brilliant young teachers who could be so inspirational, and they have their hands are tied by having to teach a test so that their kids succeed. And if they don't succeed, the school gets a grade. You don't want to be part of a C school or an F school. You're going to lose your funding. And it's just a very skewed way of looking at it. It's based upon parents and governments wanting our kids to succeed. So the ideas behind it, I think, are positive. It's just they're not looking at the bigger picture of what really creates success.
Well, I think if you can manage to learn an instrument and go through the years of persevering and practicing and getting all this brain development from just playing an instrument and learning an instrument, I mean, you can become really anything. You can look at all these ballet dancers who go on careers. Look at people studying music and then go into careers and study medicine or whatever. They all succeed just because they have all these skills that they developed from doing an art form.
It's so very true.
It needs to be it needs to be talked about, I think, that all these and it's what I find interesting is the experiments have been done already. I mean, the information is there. It shows it's there, it's done. So it's just for governments to realize it. And
well, I try to be an ambassador for that because, I'm sure you've heard this from many musicians. I've been highly sought after violinist and orchestral violinist, especially, for many years. And neighbors would come up and say, "That's wonderful. So you play violin? Wonderful. And what do you do for a job?"
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There it is. This is my job. This is a career. This is a life avocation. I have a house and cars and, a life, and based upon performing music. And it is vitally important. Besides being an income, it's a way of life.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, and your show is really helping with that, I think, because you're hearing from musicians a little behind the scenes and showing that we're real people and that we have varied interests, and that music is central to our lives.
Well, that's the whole idea, to do that, because I think I just think it's like planting a seed, you just have to, you just have to do it.
I have the age-old story. Both of my parents were musicians. My dad was an opera tenor and my mother was a cellist. And I was exposed to music. I wasn't forced to play an instrument. I heard the Boston Symphony play Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral Symphony, when I was 5 years old. And I went home, and I remember on the stairs, the entrance stairs to my house, I begged my parents for a violin. Really? And as soon as I got the violin at 5 years old, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Amazing. No question. I've never had a desire to do anything other than music from that age. And I feel it's a little bit like I'm insane, but it's also, it's a great gift to have known at that age what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, I still have a little diary that my daughter kept, and she wrote in the diary when she was 10, she wrote she wanted to be a ballet dancer. And she's a ballet dancer now. That was the dream, yeah. And it's exactly what you are saying. So you knew exactly, and isn't that amazing? And now you are, living the dream that you had of doing it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's true that you say that people ask, what is your real job? Because not seeing that as a profession.
Right. They say, don't you have fun? You must have fun playing the violin. It's fun. Yeah. Yes, it is fun. It's also a responsibility. It's a lot of work. I hear people say quite often, aren't you talented? You're so talented. And I'm not a fan of that word because talent to me is based upon, of course, it's a proclivity to do something, but it's based upon work, thinking of things, working hard, drilling, thinking about music, feeling it deeply and assessing it in your heart and your soul. And that's an almost constant sense of work. And some of the best musicians I know are practicing as hard as they were when they were kids. The work never ends. And talent, oh, you have a God-given talent. Well, maybe I have a God-given gift to want to be a musician.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, it's a lot of work. And it's work that I love. So I'm very lucky there, but it's work. It's the work.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. But Scott, this is so lovely to talk to you.
Likewise.
My goodness. Do you ever come to Vienna? Because
I was just going to say, I need to come to Vienna. I have dear relatives in Vienna, and they also have a little Schlüssel in St. Johann in Pongau outside of Salzburg. So hopefully I'll come soon. I'll have to look you up when I'm there.
I would love to meet you in person. You would please write to me when you are here. So have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you so much.
And I hope to speak to you soon again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Petra.
Okay, Scott. See you.
Yeah.
Bye.